get started here. And again, I want to welcome everybody here tonight. I know we're a little bit short on some of the folks, but they'll be jumping in here. The time thing has probably got some people messed up. Maybe, I don't know. But I know it was nice to have that extra hour of sleep last night, even if it did mean that we had one extra hour of 2020. So that's okay, though. All right, let's go ahead and begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments, and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. All right. Tonight, the lesson is we're going to examine some of the stuff that, just Solomon's court, some of the things that he had going for his court, and just how extravagant was it. And then, it may have been very extravagant back in those days for the Jewish standards, but maybe not so much compared to some of the other ancient Middle Eastern rulers that were there. And we're also going to look at the building of the first temple and some of the things about the first temple. So where are we now in our journey through First Kings? We're still right here about halfway into the first 10 chapters, and this week we're going to go to where the temple is built, and then next week we're going to maybe concentrate a little bit more on the dedication of the temple and what that meant, and is that something for us today to look at, and so forth. So but we'll be getting to where we got the temple built this week, and then we'll dedicate it next week. And so and in Chronicles, we're still we're pretty much done with First Chronicles, true, but right now we're still talking about the Solomon on the upswing. He's still getting bigger and bigger and better, and so those are the good times where you can concentrate on people in their good times. So but that's where we are if we're taking Second Chronicles and First Kings together, how they complement each other. And in a couple of cases we'll see tonight, there's a case of where Second Chronicles we look at to kind of verify something that was, you look at it in First Kings and you say, oh boy, that's a very high number, and then Second Chronicles brings it back down to earth a little bit. So we'll look at that. Now, a second thing that I wanted to talk about was that the King James Version ends in chapter 4. If you look it up, it ends with this verse, and there came of all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon from all kings of the earth, which had heard of his wisdom. Now that's in the King James Version. In the Tree of Life version, chapter 4 ends with verse 20, where it says, Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea in abundance, eating and drinking and rejoicing. And then the 14 verses of chapter 4 then become the first chapter, the beginnings of chapter 5. So if you look in the Tree of Life version, which we use, chapter 5 verse 1 is actually then would be chapter 4 verse 21 in the King James Version, just so that in case you got a little bit confused about that. I know I did until I figured it out. So then that happens sometimes in the Tree of Life version. They go back to some of the original demarcations for Torah that were not followed with King James version. So now here we are in 1 Kings 5:1. So now Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the river to the land of the Philistines up to the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Now, there's an awful lot to unpack right there in that verse. Here we've seen this is the kingdom of Solomon, the empire that Solomon enjoyed, and um, there's some interesting things here because remember, normally what will happen is when a king in those days would die, all of the countries that he had conquered and that they were paying him tribute, they would immediately go into the revolt mode and stop paying tribute. And so the new king, the son of, or whoever the successor was of that king, would then have to buckle on his sword, go to war, or at least threaten to go to war, or whatever. He had to take an overt action to bring his kingdom back into order. And for for David and Solomon, I think it was kind of miraculous that when David died, the kings around there decided, well, you know what? Things are just going real good right now. The way they are, we're not going to fight Solomon, and so we'll just keep paying the tribute. And as a result, Solomon never had to fight any wars, and the people lived in peace and prosperity for the entire 40 years of Solomon's reign, which is just incredible that there were no incursions and everything was really good. Now, the verse there gives some boundaries, and it says from the river, well, of course, back in those days the river was Euphrates. Okay, that was the river when somebody talked about it. And so it went from the river up here in the Euphrates down to what they said the river of Egypt. Now, if I were to ask any of you, what is the river of Egypt? Everybody's going to raise their hand and they're going to say, well, silly, that's the Nile. And then I would have to hit the buzzer over there that says, meh. It wasn't the Nile. Okay, the river of Egypt was known as the Wadi El Arish. Okay, and it was not the Wadi El Irish, it was the Wadi El Arish. Now it is. I got a picture of it right here that you can look at, and that's this thing right here, this blue line right here. That was the biblical border of Israel, the southern border of Israel, and that it's a dry riverbed basically. You can follow it today quite easily if you wanted to, and it ran down here. Well, then and up through here. This is, if you'll see where Asman here is, right in the middle of your screen. Well, then the line went on up to the north and west, north and east, and that was what Joshua, that was where Joshua cut it off at, and they didn't conquer anything further south. However, David had taken this area down to Eilat and gave Israel a seaport down in their southern border. So that was important too, for financial reasons. And so, and that is today you'll see this straight line here from Eilat, well, actually Ezion Geber, up here to Well, it run this line here that you see, the straight line, it runs on up to the Mediterranean, and so that's um, that is the Israel's southern border today. You remember previously, I think after the 67 war, I believe it was, where Egypt attacked them, and then Israel, they retaliated. They defended themselves, and really, really whooped up. And it may not have been the 67 war; it might have been the 73 war, Yom Kippur War. But anyway, Israel took over all of the Sinai Peninsula then. Well, as a measure of good faith and so on and so forth, they decided, well, we'll give the Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt because, well, number one, it's a lot of territory. There's no infrastructure down there, and it was just easier for Israel to say, okay, yeah, we'll give you that for some peace up here in Israel. Well, that never works out very well for Israel. Every time they would give an inch, then the other side would want to take a mile, and typical of that, then they did give that back to Egypt. And I'll say, in that one instance, though, Egypt and Israel have been at peace ever since they made that famous peace treaty at Camp David, and between Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat. Now, that was not particularly popular among the Arab nations, and Anwar Sadat was then shortly thereafter assassinated during a military parade, and so I got to I got to listen to the firsthand details of that from some embassy friends who were actually in the stands, sitting right behind Anwar Sadat when he was gunned down, and they said it was a lively parade, that's for sure. So anyway, but when you hear about the river of Egypt, this is what it is here. It's Wadi El Arish, and a wadi is basically just a dry river bed that sometimes, if there was a lot of rain, you'll get some water that goes through there, but for the most part, it's just a dry river bed. All right, any questions or comments so far as that we've gone thus far? Okay, then going on, the Bible talks about some of the things that in Solomon's court. They said it was very elegant, it was very prosperous, but not as much as, say, more established and older kingdoms, older empires, such as the Persian Empire. And Alfred Edersheim, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's a historian. He's also a Messianic Jew, lived in the 1800s, and has written a number of books on various things involving Israel and Judaism and so forth. If you ever have a chance to get some of his books, please do, because it's good reading. He wrote a book about the temple in Yeshua's time and how it operated and all the things that they did, and it very, very insightful into how the mindset of the Jewish people at that time. He also wrote another book called "The Life and Times of the Jewish People in the Time of Jesus." And there again, that is something that's really, really good, because it gives you some good insight as to how people lived then. And then now he also did a deal that I use a lot. It's called History of the Bible, and I think it's like 10 volumes, or I don't know how many volumes it is. But it goes through the entire Bible, and just gives you some background notes on every. It's a commentary on the Bible, and he does a really fine job of it from a historical Jewish standpoint, and that's what he brings out is Jewish things. In fact, tonight some of the things I'll be talking about were from Edersheim, and so this is what I'm just going to quote him here on some stuff in Solomon's temple. Said or in Solomon's court here. Said it's difficult to give the exact equivalent of the 30 measures of fine flour. And if we read that, you would, one of the things that they said was it's 30 measures of fine flour. And so there are lots of calculations in that regard. So according to the calculation of the rabbis, that's in a biblical dictionary, volume 3, page 1742, in case you're interested, they would yield 99 sacks of flour. Well, that'd be depending on whether you had a Walmart sack or a Target sack, I reckon. But anyway, they said 99 sacks of flour, and he said that he was told that 1 bushel of flour makes up 14 4-pound bread loaves. And then that way, go into it even further. 1 sack of flour, that would be 4 bushels, would be 56 loaves of bread, or about 224 pounds of bread. That's a lot of bread. And this for 99 sacks would give 22,176 pounds of bread, which at 2 pounds per person would supply 11,088 people. So, rounded down to about 11,000 people. So they're saying that Solomon, his court, his government there was about 11,000 people, and maybe. And then another way of calculating all of this stuff would bring you could actually bring that level up to maybe 15,000 people in Solomon's administration, or in his reign, as it were. Now, that sounds like a whole lot of stuff that you would have in there, because it had like 60 measures of fine flour, 60 measures of meal. Well, what that does is that means that you got 90 measures of bread making stuff. And then now this is every day. This is what they consumed every day. And then 10 fat oxen, 20 pasture fed oxen, and 100 sheep, besides deer and gazelles, roebucks, and fatted geese. All right. So I guess a fatted oxen was one that they had set around, that kept him up in the feedlots and fed him GMO corn till he got really big and fat. And then the pasture fed ones were the ones that were out there and just in the pasture. They'd go out there, grab one of them, bring him in, and turn him into hamburger. So, but that was, so basically you got 30 oxen per day and 100 sheep per day, besides any of the wild caught things that they would bring in. That's a lot of stuff that they had to get together. We don't really think of that too much, when you talk about a court and who's there and so forth. So this kind of brings it down to a level of, okay, now how do they do all of that? How's that? What's the logistics of all of that? And maybe some of you are thinking, who cares? Get on with it. Let's go. So let me finish this off that that in the court of Cyrus, okay, the Medo-Persian ruler, it seems like that from other readings that we have there, that he went through 400 sheep and 300 lambs and 100 oxen and 30 horses. Horses? What? And 30 deer and 400 fatted geese and 100 young geese and 300 pigeons and 600 small fowl. Wow, it's a lot. And 3,750 gallons of wine per day. That's a lot of grape stomping, I tell you what. And then 75 gallons of new milk a day. I can go along with that. But they also had 75 gallons of buttermilk, sour milk per day. And so that may have been a little bit exaggeration, but what that would equate to then would maybe be 15,000 people on his payroll in Babylon. So just to kind of give you an idea of what was involved in feeding the various administrations and governments at the time. We don't think about that. And, in today's world, everybody, it's a lot more just individual. You get a salary, you go out and feed yourself. But back in those days, that was their salary. In some cases that they got to eat. And so they were also sometimes paid in bags of salt. That was the Roman soldiers for many years. That was part of their pay. They were paid in salt, and so that's also where we come up with the saying that yeah, so and so is not worth his salt, meaning he's not worth the paycheck that we're giving him. And so I bet you didn't know that. Some of you didn't know that. I thought that was just fascinating. So now you can win a game of Trivial Pursuit. All right. Now, here's the discrepancy. I was telling you about that there's some differences between Second Chronicles and First Kings, and here is here's one of those differences. In First Kings, it said that Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. But in Second Chronicles 9:25, it said that he had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horsemen that he stationed in the chariot cities and with the king in Jerusalem. All right, the 4,000 is a lot more believable, actually. And there's other places that said that yeah, it was 4,000, and that this one in First Kings 5:6 may have been a clerical error. And I know, people talk about, well, the Bible is inerrant and it's perfect and so forth. Well, yeah, but man is not perfect. And so I think this is one of those cases where somebody put, he moved the decimal place over once, one that he didn't need to do. 4,000 stalls of horses compared to the other kings that had horses and so forth. It makes perfect sense. The 40,000 would not have, and it would have, 10 times the amount of horses that would have broken the treasury of Solomon, because horses are expensive. Even back 3,000 years ago, they were expensive. So that was almost kind of a rabbi trail, as one of those things that, things that make you want to go, all right. So now David had said back in Kings, First Kings 5:19 and 19 through 20, said, so behold, I intend to build a house for the name of Adonai my God, as Adonai spoke to my father David, saying, your son, whom I will set upon your throne in your place, he will build the house for my name. So now command that they cut cedars from Lebanon for me. My servants will be your servants, and I will give you wages for your servants according to whatever you say. For as you know, there is none among us who knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians. Okay. All right. So, first of all, a couple of things here. This is Solomon talking about how that David wanted to do it, but then he didn't get to do it because he was a warrior and had too much blood on his hands. So it fell to Solomon to build the temple, and he had been in contact with, in touch with Hiram. He was. And let me go back up to this right here. This particular map shows the city of Tyre. I've also heard it pronounced Tyre, but if you're from Texas, it's Tyre. But it's the city of Tyre, and the king of this whole region here. This is, we would call this Phoenicia, because you have Tyre here and Sidon or Sidon right up here. Well, Hiram was the king of all of this kind of stuff. He was a descendant of the sea people who were pretty. They were pretty stout fellows. You know, they when they were at their heyday, they wreaked a lot of havoc along the Mediterranean shores, and people were afraid of them. And they came up against Egypt a couple of times in some battles, and quite frankly, they beat the stuffing out of Egypt. You know, Egypt was no match for the way that these guys fought. And so anyway, so that's what Solomon's got up there on his northwestern side. And guess what? David was friendly with Hiram. They were buds. They got along. They respected each other. They had no interest in fighting each other. And so Solomon decided, well, let me talk to Hiram and see what he would say here. And they did the diplomatic schmoozing and so forth, and so he told him, look, in I didn't read all of the verses, okay, so I'm just kind of skipping ahead. I didn't want to go through all that, but he went to Hiram and said, there's no reason for us to be at odds with each other. You know, David, my father, was your friend. You guys got along famously, and so why can't we do the same thing? And in fact, I want to build a temple for Adonai, for my God. And I would like for you to supply the cedars to, the timbers, the door for the wood for holding this temple up and just constructing it. And so he said, and if you'll do this, I'll pay your people. I'll pay your servants, your servants, and I will. And he says, and my servants will be with your servants. We're both going to work together, and I will pay your people so that they would have, a wage, and you won't have to. And so, and then he kind of flattered him a little bit. And he says, because there's nobody that knows how to cut these great big old trees down like the Sidonians, the people from Sidon. So Hiram then, he agreed. He said, that's a good idea. He said, I'd rather get paid for working than I would be to be in a war and have to fight all the time. So he said, sounds good. That's great. Let's do it. So he told him that, okay, you cut the cedars and cypress, not the ciders and the cypress. Okay. The cedars and cypress trees in Lebanon. And Solomon then said, I'll pay them a fair wage. And in addition of all of this, then let me get back down to my notes, because otherwise I'll be off of it. Okay. So there was, let me go to this one first. They got together a labor force for the temple. And this labor force consisted of 30,000 conscripts of non-Israelite workers. Basically, they were slaves, okay, the slaves of Israel. And what they did was they would take 10,000 of them and send them up to work in Lebanon, cutting the trees and doing whatever they were required to do. And they would go up there and work for a month, and then they would come back home, and they would be, I'd say, be off. But if they were slaves, they'd have to go back to their normal slavery. And but they would be back home in Israel for 2 months. So it was 1 on, 2 off, 1 on, 2 off, which is pretty good deal. And so then you would also had people that would work the cutting of the stones. He had like 70 or 80,000 stone cutters, masons, that could go up and quarry stone out of the limestone quarries north of Israel, north of Jerusalem. And then he also had 70,000 porters. And so those are the guys, the transportation experts, as it were. All right, and they would transport the big blocks of stone back to Israel. And a fascinating thing about all of this, the stones were cut off site. Okay, so they couldn't just bring them on site and then start cutting them. Because obviously they didn't have saws that would cut the stone. They had to use a chisel and a mallet and just going and chip away. And so they said, no, we're not going to do that. There's not going to be any sound of steel on steel to build the temple, because what is steel on steel mostly? Well, that's swords clanging against other swords in war and battle. So they didn't want even the sound of war to be associated with this temple that Solomon was building for Adonai. So anyway, this sounded like a pretty good deal to Hiram, and these were the numbers that they had: 30,000 and 70,000 porters and 80,000 stone cutters and 3,600 supervisors. Always got to have the bosses. So that's a big bunch of people, and basically Israel, toward the end of Solomon's reign, they were getting kind of tired of this, and so that's what actually eventually split up the kingdom. Was the when Solomon's son Jeroboam, he well, we'll get into it in other lessons, but basically he decided he was not only going to keep the conscription up and the taxes and all that, he was going to increase them just to let everybody know who's boss. And of course, it split the kingdom. They voted with their feet, and the 10 tribes went north and left him with Judah and Benjamin. So anyway, these are what they call the Cedars of Lebanon. Okay, and you can see, I don't know if you notice, these little people. They're not little people; they're regular people down here. And what you can see their relative size compared to the trees. These are great trees. These cedars of Lebanon, being cedar, they are naturally insect resistant, they are rot resistant, and so forth, and they smell great. And so this, I just got this picture of the Cedars of Lebanon. Evidently, from what I can read, the area of Lebanon up along the coast and so forth, even further north, the cedars were just absolutely incredible. They were outstanding, and there were large forests of them. And this is one of the few remaining groves of native cedars in Lebanon today. And so go back up to, let's see, did I do? Okay, now here's one that is kind of interesting. That if you had, if you took all of the gold today that was used in the temple. There were 270 tons of gold used in the temple, and 575 tons of silver. Bronze was 610 tons, and oh my goodness, 3,400 tons went straight to nothing but, it was like iron stuff and nails, and I don't know what all they use the iron for. Anyway, all of these things added up, and so I took a kind of calculated just the silver and the gold. And if you took gold at its equivalent today of $1,880 roughly, and some change, that equates to 16,243,200,000. So basically, that is $6.2 billion. That's a lot of coin. That's a lot of shekels. And if you took the silver, 575 tons of silver at today's market, that's basically $435,000 just for the silver. And then I didn't calculate the bronze or the iron, but you get the picture. There's a lot of money that was donated to the temple complex there. All right. Now, I would like to try something here that I don't know how it's going to work, to tell you the truth, but these are the first two verses in 1 Kings 6, and it came to pass, and you're gonna okay, I'll go ahead and read that. But came to pass 480 years after the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv. Okay, and it goes on. They began to build Adonai's house. All right, and it took them. Okay, and the house that King Solomon built for Adonai was 60 cubits long. That's 90 feet. 20 cubits wide. That's 30 feet wide, and 30 cubits high. That is 45 feet tall. So that's how it was built. All right. Now, how does that compare? Here is how it compares size-wise to what we have: Solomon's temple. All right. Solomon's temple to Herod's temple. And you can see down here in as a plan view of these things, Solomon's temple is this one down here in the far right hand corner. And if you look right down below it, you've got Herod's temple. Now, to be kind of fair, okay, this had a wall around it. So what they're talking about is this wall here against this wall here, and the temples were, Solomon's temple was smaller, much smaller compared to Herod's temple, and this would be how it appeared, or how it would fit into say an American football field, because American football fields are 100 yards long. Okay, so they're 300 feet, 300 feet, a little over 300 feet long, and the temple was just again, the temple complex, not the entire temple, all of this out here, but just the building itself was 60 and 20, so it was 80 cubits total long, and that equates to 12 okay, 80 cubits. How did I count that up? So I'm having a senior moment here. It was 60 cubits long, so that's 90 feet, and that's 20 cubits wide. That's 30 feet wide. So it's big, 90 by 30, and it was 45 feet tall. Okay, that's what it was. All right, and that's how it's sized up and compared to, and you'll see that Solomon's little temple here, compared to, you could probably put this temple into this temple. It was that much difference in their size. Now, all right, I've got some books here that I just thought, I have really enjoyed them over the years, and I'm going to make a shameless plug here. All right, for this set of books right here by these people. The what I'm trying to read it backwards there. Rose Guide to the Temple, and it's got some really great pictures, got good stories, and then this picture that I'm showing you now comes from that, and they got great timelines as to when things occurred, and so forth. Now they are still of the opinion that the temple was built up on the Temple Mount, what we call the Temple Mount today, and many of you know that I don't think so. I'm not really hard over on it one way or the other, but it's beyond the scope of what we were going to be talking about today for me to get into that. All right. So now there is something that that I was going to be looking at here. That I noticed the Bible doesn't talk about the veil going into the Holy of Holies. So we may be talking about that later on. All right. So this is what it looks like. And you can point out that in this video, if the video works, it'll point out some of these things. And let's just go ahead. Any comments or questions so far? Okay, well then let me see if I can get the video kicked in. And I'm going to change the share from this to, it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, that he began to build the house of the Lord, and the house which Solomon built for the Lord. The length thereof was 80 cubits, and the breadth was 20 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits, and the porch before the temple of the house 20 cubits. It was the length thereof according to the breadth of the house, and the cubits breadth of the house for the, now you're seeing part of the Solomon's temple, I assume.
Yes. And it's moving.
It's moving. Okay, I'm going to continue reading. Should not be fastened on the walls of the house. The door for the middle chamber was up in the right side of the house, and they went up with winding stairs into the middle chamber and out of the middle into the third. And the house, that is, the temple before it, was 40 cubits long. The oracle in the forepart was 20 cubits in length, and the 20 cubits in breadth, and 20 cubits in height. And within the oracle, he made 2 cherubims, olive tree, each 10 cubits high. And he set the cherubim within the inner house, and they stretched forth the wings of the cherubim, so that the wings of one touched the wall, and the wings of the other touched the other wall, and their wings touched one another in the midst. He carved all the walls of the house around with carved figures of cherubims, palm trees, and open flowers within and without. And the whole house he overlaid with gold until he finished all the house. And for the entering of the oracle, he made doors of olive tree, and the side posts were a 5th part of the wall. So also he made for the door of the temple post of olive tree, a 4th part of the wall. and the two doors were a fir tree, and the two leaves of the door were folding, and the two leaves of the other door were folding. And he carved there on cherubim and palm trees and open flowers, and fitted with on them carved work. Solomon made all of the vessels, the altar of gold, the candlesticks, and the showbread table. On the right side, 5 candlesticks on the left, 5 on the right, and they're sitting before all of the flowers. And he set two pillars up on either side. He called one of them something, and the other one Boaz. I'm not reading too well. And upon the top of the pillars were lily work, so that the works of the pillars finished. And he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. It was round. His height was 5 cubits, and the line of, it stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking forward, looking for the north, and north the west, and 3 toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above them, and all of their 100 parts were inward, and it was a handbreadth thick. And the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, with flowers of lilies. It contained 2,000 baths. He made 10 bases of brass, 4 cubits. That was the length of one base, and 4 cubits the breadth. Cubits the height of it. On the borders there were between the ledges were lions, oxen, cherubim. Every base had 4 brazen wheels. And the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Then he made 10 lavers of brass, 1 laver containing 40 baths, and upon every one of the 10 basins 1 laver. And he put 5 bases on the right-hand side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house. And he set the sea on the right side of the house, eastward over against the south. So was ended all the work that King Solomon made for the house of the Lord. I guess you just got to be smarter than your equipment, and obviously I'm not. All right, so this is moving. This is the temple that the deal that I was talking about. See how it's all. This was a model made for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and in this one, in their model, they're showing 10 tables of showbread. Now, again, this is a little model that somebody had come up with, and what was interesting in the description in the Bible of this temple, it doesn't talk about a veil, the big curtain between the Holy of Holies and the holy place. It just talks about the 2 bifold doors. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that you would have that. Notice the roof up there. It looks almost Byzantine, where this looks like a dome. And so there again, that's the